Well, first of all, I want to welcome you on behalf of the Global Coalition on Aging and our colleagues with WSIS. We're very, very excited to be part of this hackathon this year. The first, I believe, actual virtual hackathon that is happening at the WSIS conference and the WSIS forum. So we are thrilled to be part of this and thrilled that you are all hacking on how ICTs are going to help us to age better. In this world today, there are increasingly more older people than there are younger people. There is a huge demographic shift, and we are focused on that at the Global Coalition on Aging and focused on how we can make people more aware of that and bring products and services and policy attention to this changing demographic. And this is why we are here today, to hopefully invigorate and encourage thinking on this subject and ideas. So welcome everyone. And just to let you know that we have more than 900 people who are hacking on this hackathon, and that this session is being recorded. I'm going to turn over the program right now to my colleague, Tala Debs, who we've been working very closely together on this, and she will give you an idea of where we're starting today's program.
Sure,
Tala?
thank you, Nancy. So I'm welcoming all of you today, and thank you for joining us. We have a distinguished panel of mentors who join us today for the first mentoring session out of 3 sessions that will be organized in a similar manner on Zoom with our different hackers for the Aging Better with ICTs first ever online WSIS hackathon. So let us, before we begin, and we split into different rooms, so each team will be actually having a one-to-one conversation with a mentor in a breakout room. And they will be having the 5 minutes time to ask all the questions they would need with every mentor. But before we move to this one-on-one breakout time, let us introduce our different mentors who are with us today. So maybe Nancy, you can start, and then I will follow up.
We decided today, unbeknownst to our mentors, but hopefully they can adjust to this, to not only introduce you, but to ask you a question, to hopefully have you define the landscape in some way, maybe part of your experience, what's going on, so that the hackers who are attending this session have more of an inside edge on what's going on with these issues that are so important to us. The issues being Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline, frailty, the issue of bone health, transportation and mobility, and financial tools for longevity. All of these themes that we're calling themes have the ability to be impacted by ICTs, which is why we are partnering with WSIS, Information Communication Technology. So we're very excited to bring the conversation on these themes into a more technical point of view. So I'm going to start with Sarah Smalley. And Sarah has, among other things, co-founded a company called WSIS. And I will let her explain what it is, but she is a really great example of an entrepreneur who has taken one of these issues of aging and applied technology to help solve that for that issue. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to open your microphone, and I'm just going to ask you a general question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, there you are. Can you tell us a little bit about WSIS briefly? And my question is, this is a technology that is directed for older people, and how are older people reacting to it? And there's a number of myths about older people and technology, and I would hope that you could help us better understand how older people are using this technology.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Really excited to to participate today, and I already feel like I will be learning as much as I'm hopefully contributing. So thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of WSIS. We are a Israel-based software company. We also have offices here in the United States. I'm here on the East Coast, down in Florida. And really, WSIS started from a personal experience. So there's really personal resonance for each of us on our founding team, and on our core team as well.
Oh, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but Karen, can you mute?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
So just leaving everyone in suspense. So it really started from a personal experience. In my case, it was my grandmother who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at age 40. So it was early onset. And so by the time that I was born, she had lost most of her motor capabilities, but most of all, it was her speech that was highly unintelligible and affected by the disease. And of course, her ability or inability to communicate by voice affected her ability to build a relationship with me and my brothers. In the case of our founder, my co-founder, Danny, who's the CEO of our company, it was a different situation, kind of the opposite, where his family member had a stroke. And in that situation, it was the opposite because it was someone who was like the bedrock of his family and who he was extremely close with that suddenly lost her ability to communicate because of the stroke that she suffered. So it's kind of the stories of within our families that were our inspiration to develop WSIS. We are we've built speech recognition technology designed for non-standard speakers. And so if you can think of the Amazon Echoes, the Siris, Google Homes, all of these technologies enabled by, activated by voice that are increasingly mainstream in our lives, what WSIS does is recognize the speech patterns of people who have atypical speech correlated with various underlying medical conditions and disorders, degenerative disease, or simply speech patterns that have changed due to age correlated conditions. So naturally, as you age, even without a specific kind of underlying disorder or condition, your voice is going, is likely to change and therefore not understood by standard speech recognition systems. So in that way, our mission really is to use our technologies to help people gain more independence in their lives and more human connection with the people they love and who love them. And so it's essentially the technology we're building and the vision that we have. We've been really fortunate to develop this technology with our users. And as Nancy mentioned, we've been learning a lot from user cohorts of aging adults. Particularly, and it's been a particularly interesting process to launch a kind of beta programs during the pandemic. And I think that's where so much of our learnings and surprises kind of came about, where there is, to some extent, Nancy, as you mentioned, some resistance to bringing in new technologies, but that's not actually specific to aging adults or populations. I think in a time of everything virtual, and I think we can all feel this right now in virtual conference like this, where there's the opportunities, but also kind of the challenge of being overloaded, with so many technologies. And we have seen that with some of the seniors that were, aging adults that we've been working with. But on the other hand, it's also been a kind of releasing some of the assumptions that we've had in people's openness to using technologies to help them, lead more independent lives, to live more to their fullest potential. And of course, in times of COVID, to actually be safer, because our technology can also be used to reduce the so much human caregiving contact, and therefore reduce viral exposure. So it's connection, communication, independence, and quality of life. And we see, more and more openness to leverage technologies like ours, new innovations to make that happen.
So I think what's really interesting, Sarah, is that you brought up two things for our mentors. One is that make it personal. When you're designing something for wherever and whomever, think about, and this is, such a bedrock idea for any writing that you do, any creation that you do. Draw from personal experience, because you're going to find the most motivation there and the most insight there. And then the other thing that you talked about was this whole myth of older people and technology, that it's not necessarily true that older people are technology hesitant. And I think that's very important too, because we want technology to be, and I see Roxanne is here, to be part of everyone's life, and to broaden digital inclusion for many people around the world. And I think Roxana will talk about that later. But thank you for that. And I also think that you're a great example of a young entrepreneur who had a personal idea and had the intelligence and the wherewithal to make it work. And it's now very successful. And I think that the people who are hacking are going to be very interested in your whole success story. And you should follow her on WSIS and see what they're doing. So now I'm going to turn the program back to Tala, who is going to talk to some of our other mentors.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And as we mentioned earlier, we have a theme that is addressing a very important topic, that is Alzheimer's and cognitive disease. So my question goes to Vera Malkovic. I hope I did not misspell the name. So my question to you, Vera, is how is technology making now a difference in the diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease? And in what direction would you like to see discovery to aid in the treatment of Alzheimer's?
There are two very distinct pieces here. One is the discovery, and particularly sort of early discovery of Alzheimer's. At the moment, that is the difficult part of the field. One of the reasons is that we are so capable in adapting. When our cognitive abilities start to decline just slightly, we are so capable of actually adapting to those changes. And you can imagine, if your memory is not quite what it used to be, what we can do these days is use calendars on our smartphones and so on, and see where we are. If we can't quite navigate as well as we used to, one of the things that we can do is, we're all now using GPSs until, my daughter sort of does not understand why I think GPS is so incredibly wonderful. But so there are those things that we can do. So from the huge variability of our sort of individual baseline capabilities across many different domains, to this ability of technology to actually help us, it's actually really difficult to develop some way of detecting the early onset. At the same time, one of the goals has been, it's out there currently, is how can we use some of these behaviors and try and figure out what might be behaviors that signal that something has changed. And of course, that will require large studies for long periods of time, tracking people and so on. And it does cause some there's privacy intrusion if we're going to that, and how comfortable are we with those things, and then how do we mitigate privacy issues and so on. So I think that's going to be one really interesting thing. There are several collaborations that are ongoing that are really interesting. That's the part of detection. I think the second piece is what happens when, with patients that actually have dementia already. And those are amazing. And I haven't been a part of those, but I have heard about them through different conferences and so on, and different groups that have been doing things. And so the engagement of people, having technology that even very advanced dementia patients can interact with, that will sort of give them the kind of information and the kind of emotional stimulation that they need. So for example, people have made these little robots that you can load the images onto, and the music and so on, and they can interact with patients, and patients love it, because even quite people with really advanced Alzheimer's will stand up and start dancing, or they love seeing the pictures of their families and so on. And not only that, but because they're these cool robots, the grandkids will come and visit the grandparent with dementia, because this is a cool toy to play with. So there has been actually incredible advance in not just sort of detecting right and early on, but actually in helping the caregivers and the families so on deal with patients. And I think so there is a tremendous amount of I think possibilities and real help in what is an epidemic and a really serious concern right now.
Thank you so much, Vera. And I really like this point that you touched on is the link between this cross-generational part, where the children can really be helping their grandparents in this, by having this fun maybe applications that can involve everyone in the family. So thank you for these insights.
I would also like to add, obviously, we don't want to bypass the idea of therapy, where this is very important too. And, I hope that you understand that the therapies are out there, and our hackers should understand, what your company is doing in terms of therapies, which are very vital to the treatment of this.
So I mean, yes. So my company is a leader in developing these therapies, and you might know that we have just had some early results on better effects on cognition that has ever been demonstrated. And so clearly, I think the goal is to develop a drug that is going to actually modify the disease. In other words, either slow it down or stop. But there is no question. I mean, I think that the technology in that case is going to, move earlier in the disease, but it's not going to go away in all of these things, and I think in our lives. But yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that the drugs are that is what everyone is hoping to do, to actually, be able to get to these late stages. But that is, I think, there's still time until we get there, unfortunately. So technology, even in that late stage, is going to be quite useful for a while.
Sure, and the technology involved in developing these treatments is also part of the overarching holistic view of technology in terms of this theme. Obviously, our hackers will not be able to develop therapies during this hackathon, but they should also think about how technology is involved in developing drug therapy, and that's
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there is more and more of that, I think, as we are going towards this, the technology is being involved. This is the big, as we all know, right? The big digital revolution. We're finding ways of really immense help from technology to be doing these things.
Which is a nice segue, Paula, to do.
Nancy and Tala, may I please interrupt you? It would be really nice if the mentors could write the name of their organization next to their name, because we have more than 50 participants who've joined us now. So it'll be very easy for them to know which organization you come from. If you could just, Tala, if you could just guide them how to do that, so that all our hackers know, all our participants know where you come from.
So they already renamed themselves. So if you can just add the name of the organization,
thank you very much.
Would be great. Thank you, Gitanjali. So in the meantime, let me introduce you to another mentor present here with us today. Mr. Duke Collier. He's the former CEO of 480 Biomedical, which is a biomedical device company. So Duke, you have spent your career developing new cutting edge business technologies where technology is really deeply involved in helping in treating diseases. So how did you come to understand the power and value of technology in dealing with treating disease? And what was the moment where you understood that technology, what was the first technology that really brought you into this?
So I'm not sure I can answer the question. I guess the way I came into the technological side was through biotechnology, and that was because I was a practicing lawyer in Washington, D.C., and I did not know much about science, but I knew a lot about how new things were approved or not by the FDA in the United States, or were paid for by insurance or the government. And so in the early days, I had a client, Amgen, which was bringing a very early product to market, erythropoietin for people with kidney failure, and it was important for the government to understand how this product worked and why it should be approved and why it should be reimbursed by the government. So I was not a technology person, but I had to learn a lot, and over the rest of the years, I spent a lot of my time in biotechnology, but also quite a bit in the areas of academic medicine and scientific research, again, as a layman, but always working with people who had complex technologies and complex therapeutic things. I want to pick up on something. My interest over the years that evolved in my personal and professional interest into a great deal of interest in how we take care of people with chronic progressive illness, many of whom have multiple comorbidities, who have issues of cognitive decline, behavioral issues, who have, in many cases, issues of social and housing and other economic insecurity, and have complex lives, which are complex for them to live by themselves and are extremely complex for people who try to care for them, including family. This has led me the last few years to spend a little bit more time on dementia, where we have so little formal therapeutic that, and in fact, we have a relatively small number of clinicians, physicians who are comfortable with treating Alzheimer's as a primary illness. And so much of the care falls on family members, and it is hard for them. And so I've spent, trying to learn myself today is a great learning experience for me, how we can be helpful in a sense of caring for caregivers. I do want to make one point that I think Vera hit on. The basic paradigm of medicine is somebody has a symptom and they seek, they diagnose themselves, they go and buy some aspirin, or they go to a doctor and there's an assessment of what the problem is, and there's a prescription of care. I think that one of the things we're seeing with dementia is sometimes, I think we're finding that with physical cues, which might be limb movement in sleep, or sleep disorders of different kinds, or various kinds of verbal patterns and eye patterns and so forth. It's possible now to detect these sometimes can be very subtle things, and gather the information in large amounts, and then using algorithmic machine learning sort of things to produce assessments that may be able to actually correlate very strongly with more sort of biological markers. Interesting work around how good, solid cognitive algorithms based on a lot of data may correlate perfectly or very well with PET scanning of brain disorder associated with Alzheimer's. And I think the ability to do that sort of detection, which can drive both therapeutic development and therapeutic choice, but also that ability to, at a different level, help people understand as family members, as caregivers, as, what is the state of, what's the progression that mom is having, and how can we respond to that with informed caring, which may involve stimulative interactivity, may involve physical activity. There's a whole world of cognitive, physical, therapeutic interaction that is developing, that the dancing and so forth that was just talked about. So I think it's a fascinating and exciting time in terms of the ability for us to both to detect mental or cognitive status in the case of Alzheimer's, physical status, and then to have much more sophisticated ability to choose therapeutic approaches, be they medicinal or one of the therapies. So.
Well, it sounds like you might have stumbled onto a new product here, something that these people should be hacking on, ways where technology can provide and it may be in development right now, it may have already happened, where they can provide a blueprint, a personal blueprint for people in terms of their changes in behavior, and how that might, through AI, be a way to determine progression of disease, which brings me to a new business idea, and which brings me to Ramesh. And I wanted to give you a few minutes, Ramesh, to talk about your background and in terms of your business experience. And I know that right now you are, pardon me, a business consultant. And there's a lot of young entrepreneurs on this call today, and many questions about how they can make that $1 million or $1 trillion business happen for them. Obviously, you have that, you could provide them with somewhat of that pathway in terms of, step by step. First thing is to be on this call, and that's the first way to make this this happen to them. But this is the silver economy is $15 trillion global business, and there are going to be 2 billion people over the age of 60 by 2050. So give these young people encouragement to move forward in this as a business.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Tala, and for making me a part of this. I am so delighted to be here with all of you and all the hackers from around the world. I spend all my time since I retired. I'm a mentor to entrepreneurs and businesses, and have been doing that for several years now. And at the end of the day, you have to start someplace with a great idea, but then you have to remember, you have to take that idea forward by converting it into something which is very tangible by way of a product or a service. And so I spend my time every day mentoring young people, and I really love it because it keeps me mentally young and allows me to interact with people who are thinking not necessarily out of the box always, but maybe even a simple problem that they're helping solve. And I would say there are many ways of getting there. And whether you're looking to start a business that is a for-profit or not for-profit, the rules are still the same. At the end of the day, you have to have more money coming into your business than money going out. what you spend. And then the bottom line, what's left, you can reinvest it further into your nonprofit, or as a profit, you just expand it and grow it. So I do think, as Nancy, as you said, the silver economy is growing. We are just so lucky to be living at a time when technology is, there's more good out of technology. And of course, since my background has been in technology and medicine, I'm a big believer there's more good out of technology than bad. Everything, you know, even when the printing press came out centuries ago, there were always negative things that were happening with people who were printing negative things and distributing. Now everybody complains about how on social media there could be negative stuff, but social media and the communication technologies have done more good than harm. And I believe it's going to get even better. And older adults, that's how we choose to call them over here. If you're over 55, at least in the United States, you are in that category of older adults. They are not technology averse and they want more communications. I got interested in relating to aging technology because we, my wife, my family and I, we took care of my mother, who we moved in to live with us, and she lived with us for 10 years. She died about 12 years ago at the age of 96. And at that time, there was no such thing as Zoom and some of the technologies. But I will never forget that my mother, who was born when the first airplane was taking off by the Wright brothers, lived through so much technology change. And what she loved the best was, she was completely bedridden, but she loved it when I would put my laptop up on her at her bed, and she could talk to her nephews and nieces who were in India, and she could see them. You know, older adults love this touching and feeling, and you know, that we just, some of the other mentors talked about. And I think really, I can't wait to see what all can be done with technology. I was just reading an article about the next, you know, everybody talks about 5G, which is, you know, the frequency, the bandwidth, but next big thing I just recently read is 10G. That's not the same area, but it's 10 gigabytes per second, which will completely change what happens with visual communication. You know, to think about technologies that are already in the works with holographic television, you know, 3D television, you know, it's just so exciting. So thank you very much for all your work that your hackathons are planning to do. And I'm so glad I can be here and be happy to help providing business and mentor guidance.
Great, Tala. I'm going to turn it over to you and to introduce our last mentor. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So we have our last but not least mentor for today, Ms. Roxana Weidmer. She's the Senior Coordinator of Digital Inclusion at the ITU. So Roxana, I wanted to ask you this question. How have older people been excluded in the uses of technology so far? Or is it a myth, or is it true actually? And can you tell us about the initiatives that are led maybe by ITU or other UN agencies that are examples on how technologies and ICTs in general are leveraging the social and economic development of this segment of older persons in society? And how can we actually help increase the adoption of technology within these within this global population of older persons?
Well, thank you, Tara. So first of all, just to clarify, we absolutely did not exclude older person from our work and from the interest that we actually pay. Please, for all the audience, I would like to highlight the fact that the digital inclusion work in the ITU, it's actually addressed to, excuse me for this. It's actually addressed to several vulnerable groups, including children and youth, women and girls, person with disabilities, indigenous person, and older person. So what is very true is that for years, actually in the last 10 years, we were tempted to address older person related digital inclusion needs from the perspective of age-related disabilities. And I have to say that with the last UN work in the decade of healthy aging, and with the work that I had the chance to do with my colleagues in WHO, I was a little bit tempted to say stop. And since last year, actually, and also thanks to WSIS session that I attend in this subject in the last 3-4 years, I would say this is not relevant anymore. And also because I turned 50 and I realized that in fact, older persons are not necessarily vulnerable groups. And we have to change mindset. So just within the framework of this group here today, I already want to share with you the fact that since last year, I'm working in a guidelines report for all our ITU members to develop policies and strategies to best adapt in their specific countries the new trends of aging, which were already highlighted by the previous speakers, and on how aging in a digital world can turn people from vulnerable to valuable, which is actually the title of the report guideline that we'll launch in next WSIS on 17th of May. So from this perspective, I want to say that yes, we have several ways that we can address the work in ITU that we are doing the current needs of how this was called by Mr. Ramesh. I think it was older adults. I'm in the older adults age almost. But so yes, I think there are several issues that we have to address together because the topics is so holistic and so complex that cannot be only addressed by ITU. I'm so happy that we have this panel, which is so so different, and I'm very impressed of the young entrepreneurs. And I was even thinking that you know, from time to time, events like this in life make us grow and became leaders in some topic, which was the case of the young entrepreneur lady that shared with us the WSIS project. So I can speak quite long about this. Let's see from which perspective. So from the perspective of digital accessibility, which is our main areas. We do believe that if the technology is built in mind with universal design, so if the technology is made accessible, so accessible technology like the smartphone who have embedded accessibility features, this type of technology is actually useful for everyone, from a young person to an older person who can enlarge phones, to a person with disabilities, but not necessarily an older person. So this is our main, let's say, target, to ensure that we do have accessible ICTs, and through by encouraging the private sector and the industry fabricants to do only accessible technology, the affordability will come with. So in this way, we manage to have the access, affordability, and accessibility. So to build jointly this inclusive digital society that we are looking at. So now, more specifically for the older person, I also think that different areas should be addressed, from some specific age-related disabilities, which I think we already have some of them, even at a younger age than older adults, you know, with wearing glasses or I do believe that the technology can already cover this, but what technology can do in addition, it's in different areas to ensure this, to increase communication, reduce whatever, let's say, loneliness aspects or whatever aspect that can be linked with older person, while increasing from others, for instance, the possibility to have this healthy aging, because technology now in our days and also artificial intelligence enable us to live longer in good health, and in particular to actively yet contribute to the society. And for me, because I also have a daughter 22 years, and I know how much the younger people are looking at entering into the labor market, and they are professional and really want to work hard and have a lot of knowledge. And from the other sides, we are supposed by 65 to also take our retirement. I'm also thinking, how could we still, through technology, through the means that we have, and the teleworking, it's a very good proof that we all were facing, how we can contribute to the society while leaving everyone the place that it deserves. So I don't want to stay longer in the market and to not leave the place to the younger generation, but I still want to contribute to the society. There are people who a whole life have dedicated to a subject, and they can become excellent mentors. We can support the young generation and transmit this knowledge to them. We cannot say that from a day to the other, we pass from going to office, even in the office in these days is in house, and then we forget everything and we cannot contribute anymore. And I think all these kind of mindsets should be changed. And I think altogether, we were also mentioning the silver economy. Yes, is very true. So also from the perspective, so business perspective, the younger generation and young entrepreneurs have to look at this, let's say, end user requirement, needs, whatever the older person may wish to consider as important at their age.
Roxana, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I know that everybody's anxious to go on to their breakout rooms, but I think the point that you bring up about technology not only being a therapy, but also a way to bring intergenerational connection.
Absolutely.
And to bring everyone together is very important. And it's all part of the themes too. So I want to thank all our mentors, because I may not see you again because you're going into your mentor breakout rooms now. And Tala is going to be in charge of that connection.